Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Random Ramblings. I'm Esp, and I'm joined by my co-host Themes, and we have a very special guest today, and that is Ryan Tanaka from the Neura Pod YouTube channel, which is all about Neuralink, one of Elon Musk's companies. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Ryan and ask you to kind of talk about what your channel is about, what the goals of your channel are, what you'd like to accomplish, kind of overall, what you think your legacy would be, if you want to think of it as a legacy. So,
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for having me on the show. I guess I started Neura Pod to just talk about Neuralink related news, and just make sure that there was accurate information related to the company, and then also just motivate and inspire as many young people as possible about neuroscience and the related tech. And then I guess so it kind of started because I had been listening and watching a podcast called Tesla Daily. It's hosted by Rod Mauer. He does a fantastic job, and he basically covers week daily updates about Tesla, the company, all the related news, and Tesla stock. And then I was always, or I had started becoming a little bit more curious about Neuralink as they started to release a little bit more progress. And then they did annual updates. And I was like, wow, this company really has potential. And Elon is truly behind it. It's not like he's just a board advisor or anything. He's actually committing some of his engineering hours and his brain to Neuralink. So I thought, well, in the future, if he makes more progress with Tesla, makes more progress with SpaceX, then he might transition to allocate more of his time to Neuralink. And I thought, number one, I'm so inspired by the company mission, and then number two, it's prime for growth, and then number three, there was nobody at the time that I could find that was doing a Neuralink specific podcast or channel on YouTube, nor just a podcast on Spotify. So all of those kind of combined, and I thought, well, I might as well do it myself. And I was selfishly wanting to learn more about the company anyway. And if I could just do that learning, synthesize down that information in a concise manner, and present it in a similar way to how Rob does with Tesla Daily, then that would probably be good for some other audience members in the future. Unfortunately, it's played out that way so far. I think now it's been about a year. It's been 11 months approximately. And so now, like, how I feel about the channel is a little bit different. But those two initial core things of wanting to have accurate news related to Neuralink and inspire as many young folks as possible about neuroscience, those two core things are still the same. There are just some other smaller goals that I have that I think could really help accelerate the growth of the channel and help inspire and just reach more people. So I guess, yeah, we may talk about those later. Yeah, overall, just super excited to have started the channel. Like, very happy I did it. Very happy to have an audience that's interested. And yeah, it's been super fun.
oh, yeah, it definitely sounds like you've experienced kind of first mover's advantage as far as kind of filling that niche, because there's tons of Tesla channels. I don't really watch Tesla content that much. I do follow the subreddit Tesla Motors, but I follow a lot of SpaceX related channels, and those are definitely a dime a dozen at this point. I'm definitely not a bad thing, because more content is great, but there's so many SpaceX channels and not nearly as many Neuralink channels. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah,
so
agreed.
I'm curious. You've mentioned that you interned at Tesla twice, and I was wondering if you could kind of run us through what that experience was like. Did you kind of get what you think is a good perspective of a full-time employee at Tesla during your internship? What was the most exciting part about it? What was maybe something that you didn't like about it? If you wanted to just talk a little bit about that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess the highest level thing that I can say is I absolutely loved it. I Yeah, both times were fantastic. Um, and it's crazy to me that the first one was 6 years ago. So in 2015, and I was on the Tesla Energy team. Um, and at the time, the team was very small, like less than 100 people. And now, if you include the Solar City acquisition and then other smaller components that are related to energy, then the overall Tesla Energy business or subset of Tesla is north of tens of thousands of people. So it's just been crazy to see both internally and from the sidelines externally what it's been like to just see that growth. It's pretty incredible. Um, let's see. So your first question was, did I get experience that's similar to a full-time employee, or did I feel that I did? Yes, I definitely felt that, especially the second time.
Mm-hmm.
So the first time I was on Tesla Energy with Power Pack deployment, and it's basically Power Pack is basically a commercial or industrial scale version of a energy storage battery pack. Um, it, yeah, so like for the car, you have to have a battery, and you can use the energy to make your car go.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of applications for having a battery for residential units, like just regular homes. And then also on a much larger scale, you can just think of how many businesses and cities and countries and just big places need energy. And if you're going to adopt renewable energy sources, then you definitely need a storage solution
Mm-hmm.
because the sun and the wind are just not reliable, particularly at the time that you need it most.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so anyway, I could go into more technical detail there, but
You mean
essentially
the
I was
sun
working.
that when it's dark?
Right, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, but there are a handful of other components that are a little bit. I don't know. I think it's useful to go into some detail there, but I guess for the purposes of answering your question, like I was working on Power Pack. It's a big battery uh, product, basically. And then the second time, I was working on supercharger deployment.
Okay.
And just the general charging infrastructure for vehicles. And so that one's kind of nice because when I talk with most people, they can kind of conceptually understand what it's like to have the energy part of the Tesla business uh, connect to the vehicle part of the business. And during that internship, my primary project was to work on putting supercharging or putting security cameras on California supercharging sites. And then we started doing it for other states nearby. And then eventually we are going to go down to Mexico and Canada and some other places.
Okay.
Um,
Uh,
but like as that was like my main project, I was the lead for that despite being an intern.
oh, that's
So
great.
any of the yeah, it was pretty incredible because like all the responsibility was on me to lead the project. Obviously, I had help from other members internally, but I was the primary contact point for the landlords, the contractors, all the members that are internal, and then there's just so many components of that project that require um, different teams internally. So like the legal team, and then the information security team, and then uh, the the Tesla supercharging service team, uh, the finance group, and so yeah, just being the primary contact point was awesome
Mm-hmm.
because it was definitely like the job that a full-time person would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm hosting an intern right now, my first intern, in fact, and yeah, I wouldn't dream of giving that scale of a project to an intern. So that sounds pretty incredible.
Yeah, that sounds That's awesome.
But let's see. The last question I believe was what's something that you didn't like?
People, both interns and full-time team members, like to joke with me that I had drank the juice, and that was very much the case. Like I bought and continue to buy in to many of the initiatives that they're working on. I think, like, number one, the mission and what they're working on at Tesla is admirable. I personally think that it's less of a needed thing now than it used to be. So, like, their mission is to basically transition the world as fast as possible and accelerate that transition via or with or from non-renewable energy sources to renewable energy sources.
Mm-hmm.
And like about a decade ago, and it was like, well, yeah, like, let's accelerate it. Let's keep, let's go faster. Now, I think there's enough inertia moving it in the right direction versus with Neuralink. It's like, if they are able to help a dozen people or 100 people or 1,000, and keep scaling that up and not have neurologic diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, even paralysis, like, those types of things are just absolutely incredible. And I'm super motivated by that. And so, yeah, I'm just happy to continue talking about that via a YouTube channel pretty frequently.
Obviously, Daniel's much more, at least initially, he's bigger into the Tesla and the Elon Musk in general, Neuralink. I personally didn't know really much about it. Like, I had heard the name Neuralink before, right? Previously to you and your content, and then I binged through it. And I'm like, wow! Like, at first I was definitely on the skeptical side of things for sure. But then, like, as I, obviously, like, I started at the very beginning, like 11 months or whatever ago, and the more and more go through, and then the chimp thing and a couple other things, and it's like, wow, this really has potential. Like, it gets me like super giddy with it. So
Awesome.
that was the one thing I wanted to mention with that. But
I appreciate you watching a lot of the content. Sweet.
Yeah, actually, there was one quote you said in one of the videos I wrote down that made me think of it. It was you said, what was it, on the no Neuralink equals no job video? And you said, it's amazing how much more people listen to the content when just one or two people share it. And I thought of that because, like, that video, I think, was about like halfway through, like, me binging your stuff. I was like, oh, I guess he's right.
Yeah.
It's,
yeah,
I guess
that's my fault. I talk his ear off constantly about all things Elon and crypto and et cetera, et cetera.
yeah, but
Sure.
psychology is like my main bread and butter. So, like, when it's like, oh, Neuralink, it's like, oh, we shove something in your skull. I was like, oh god.
What did you say was your main bread and butter?
Oh, psychology. Like, that's what I'm really interested in for the. I got a bachelor's in psych, and hopefully once the pandemic kind of chills out a little bit more, I was gonna plan on going back for more, but we'll see. But I guess in terms of questions, since this is supposed to be an interview, right? Okay. Let's look at some of these. Oh, okay, yeah, that's a good one. So on one of your initial videos, you made like a graph of like where people are at distributed in terms of like, oh, hey, these people are super skeptical, or these people are kind of like, they think it's gonna work maybe. And then you had yours like pretty at the end of like super positive. Just so, do you think yours has changed in that time? Like, in terms of like your placement, because that was near the start of your 11-month journey, we'll say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say, like, at the beginning, I knew that I was pretty naive and did not know about like this huge space that would require me that would enable me to have a really fully baked thought process and determine whether or not Neuralink would be successful. Now I feel like I've kind of filled in that gap a little bit, but there's still so much to go. And so, with that being said, like, I think I'm still super optimistic that Neuralink and the team will be able to motivate a bigger team and continue making progress at a fast enough rate that they'll eventually get there. But now I'm at a place where I realize, like, okay, here are the specific things that they have challenges with. Whereas before it was like, okay, well, there's just a bunch of challenges out there. I'm not exactly sure what those specific challenges are. But I guess to answer your question, like I'm still extremely optimistic that Elon and the greater team will be able to just showcase enough to get to a point where they're able to continue onboarding more and more really intelligent, motivated talent. And then like they'll be able to take on those people and then keep growing. And eventually they'll get to a point where it's like, okay, they literally have the top, they have the top engineering talent and they're going to be able to figure out something useful and something scalable. Just like he has been able to do with Tesla and SpaceX.
Right. I'm kind of at the same boat. I'm definitely a lot more positive on it than I was previously. And to me, it's more so like definitely not if, it's definitely when now. So, but
Yeah, agree.
Speaking of optimism, let's talk about the overall kind of timeline of what Neuralink is planning to do. So let's talk about all the way from short term to medium term, long term. I believe in the short term, a lot of the use cases are helping people with certain disabilities, like certain types of paralysis. I think some of the longer term goals may be trying to solve issues like Alzheimer's, and then there are a ton of non-medical applications that we can talk about as well. So, would you like to kind of go through what you envision Neuralink doing in the short term, like within the next 5 years, versus what you see in maybe the next couple of decades, versus like the overall goal, like merging with AI, that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I'll first start it off with like a 1 to 2 minute summary of the high level version of what the Neuralink tech is. So basically, like Neuralink wants to have a surgical robot perform a surgery on your brain or on your skull, where it's cutting a piece of your skull out and then inserting thousands of electrodes into an area of your brain. Most likely at the beginning, it'll be the cortex.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they place those electrodes, they can read the electric signals that are being fired through the neurons in that specific area. And then with that information, they can determine what you were wanting to do or what you were thinking about doing. And then send that information wirelessly via Bluetooth to your phone. And then that basically bridges the gap between your phone and your brain. And then at that point, you can basically use your phone or just think about what you want to do. And your phone will be able to do basically do the things that you were wanting to do.
Mm-hmm.
But you wouldn't have to physically move your thumb or type or do anything. With you would just have to think about it. So I guess the first application is probably going to be to help paralyzed people use a keyboard and or mouse to control their computer, and that'll be game changing for them. And then after that, I think one of the next things might be to help cure blindness.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, somebody who like isn't able to see well, you could basically have like an artificial eye and connect that to Neuralink.
Would the artificial eye be similar to like a camera sensor, or are we talking about something different?
Yes, probably very similar to a camera sensor. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of these future aspirations are not super long shot or super, yeah, they're not super out in the future in some ways. Like for many of the applications, all you need are just really, really good sensors. And then if you can feed the information from the sensors to your Neuralink, then you can basically like feel whatever the sensor is feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, like you can have a third arm or a fourth arm or so.
And do you think all of these things will be possible with N1? I believe that's the name of the first device with like 1,000 electrodes.
Right. Yeah. The first one is called N1. I'm not exactly sure. I think, yeah, I think it will not be. Yeah. The paralyzed, the one, yeah, the ability to help paralyzed people use a keyboard and or mouse.
Mm-hmm.
That'll probably be possible with the N1.
Mm-hmm.
That one's kind of the low hanging fruit. Yeah. After that, a lot of the things that they're aspiring to, there's just so many technical challenges and quite frankly, like ethical challenges and regulatory challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But once they're able to just demonstrate that the technology for paralyzed patients is viable and safe and relatively long lasting, I think that'll help accelerate a lot of the other future developments.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that's gonna open the floodgates for every like person that wants to finance it. And it's just like let's go start printing money.
Yeah, personally, I'll be as soon as there's a consumer device, I'm getting one. I'm sure of that. I'm always an early adopter with that kind of stuff. Regardless of the risk. Maybe to my detriment.
Sure. No, I understand. I'm pretty similar for most things. Yeah.
So
you get one? If, like a Neuralink when it first comes out, Ryan, or
well, so I think that's a good point to bring up. Is I think at the beginning the cost would be prohibitively high for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fair point.
Additionally, like I don't know, it's kind of like I don't know. It's probably true that anybody who doesn't have a severe neurologic disorder probably should just not get one until those folks who do are able to get one.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like it could improve their life so significantly, whereas ours it's kind of just for enjoyment and entertainment.
Mm-hmm. When you say prohibitively expensive, do you mean like orders of magnitude beyond the cost of LASIK, which is what Elon is shooting for long term, I believe?
Correct. He is shooting for that. I think at the beginning, my guess is without insurance, it might cost like $50,000 to $100,000.
Yeah.
But yeah, like in the long run, the goal is to get to a point where it's around $3,000 to $5,000. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to walk us through some of the longer term things that Neuralink is aiming for? And kind of a side question to that, do you think that they're going to be exploring these other applications in a breadth first manner where they go for like trying to research a bunch of different subject areas in parallel, or do you think it's going to be depth first where they accomplish a goal and then they set out to accomplish another goal in sequence?
Yeah, so the longer term goals will probably be north of 10 years from now. Mm-hmm. Some even 20. And then when you get to the point where people are talking about having the ability to download like a martial arts package where you're able to just learn it very quickly, I think that's a couple decades or more off in the future probably.
Mm-hmm. That still sounds super optimistic, but
yeah. Yeah, it's just so tough to predict.
Yeah, and I think confirmation bias comes in, for me at least, with kind of being optimistic with timelines, because you look at Moore's law, which is pretty much held up. Moore's law meaning that computing power doubles every 18 months, and then there's a lot of other fields of research that are still experiencing exponential growth. And so if you kind of extrapolate that into the future, it's very easy to be optimistic about seeing these kind of sci-fi things happen within the next few decades? Are you that optimistic about Neuralink's applications within like 20 years?
Generally, like I'm quite optimistic about just people continuing to be motivated enough to make more progress in any part, any any industry. But it's just a matter of like, how are we as a society or like inspiring and motivating the groups,
Mhm.
right? Because there are so many industries that have not experienced what seem to be equivalent like improvement or advancement in yeah, like I, I I guess by now I would have expected industries like farming or transportation or even healthcare. I would have expected a little bit faster progress,
Mhm.
but we've kind of just experienced it with consumer technology. And but really, like, all technology needs to be accelerated, and so yeah, it's just a matter of like, where are all the young people being inspired? So I think that's part of the reason. I think, yeah, it's probably important that a lot of people are more inspired about neuro related stuff, like brain related things, neuroscience, neurotechnology. And if they are, then it wouldn't surprise me if we continue to see that trajectory.
Mhm.
But I guess, what was your other question about Neuralink?
Sorry, I'm like opening new tangents every 5 seconds.
Random
The
brain.
other the other yeah, that's on par for our show. The other question was basically like, do you think that they're gonna be researching a lot of these kind of longer term things in parallel, along with the shorter term goals?
I wish I had a better answer, but I think the answer that I see right now is there's so many technical hurdles for them to get through first
Hmm.
that they're just gonna have to work uh, on a breadth of different issues before they're able to make a clear decision of like what path to move forward with after that. But even just like being able to process the signals on the chip at the location of the surgery, like that's incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And then even prior to that is just the material science. Like, I think that's the biggest challenge that they face is the material science problem of having materials that will work well for what they need with processing and getting clear enough signal with not that much noise and have it not react poorly in the brain. It's just, yeah, just seems ridiculously difficult. And for that to last for many, many years,
Hmm.
that seems really, really difficult.
Hmm.
So material science, signal processing, and then the robot development, and then the regulatory hurdles. Like there are just so many things that they need to tackle. Once they get through all that, then uh, they'd probably operate in the same way that Tesla or SpaceX does, like a wide variety of different initiatives, uh, kind of silos all over and working on different projects. But I think that's probably the fastest way to move.
That makes sense. So there's prerequisites that they have to overcome first. And I guess that's why Elon has reiterated so many times that he's wanting to demonstrate that you can insert a Neuralink chip and then safely remove it, because from what I understand, one of the hurdles from a materials perspective is that the electrodes would degrade over time. Is that a challenge that is still kind of a major risk for the Neuralink project? Um,
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's probably the most difficult one. It's just, yeah, the general material science problem, specifically having long-lasting uh, electrode threads inserted in the brain that don't move so much that they become unreliable and they don't degrade and they don't get they don't get eaten up by the brain. Yeah, so I guess yes, I think you're right. That's one of the reasons that Elon mentions that. I think he also mentions that because there are some folks who are concerned about getting version 1 of the implant,
Mhm.
and then in the future feeling like they would want version 3 because it's so much improved, and then not being able to.
Mhm.
So I think that's one of the reasons that he states it, is just to alleviate some of those concerns.
Mhm. I could eventually see Neuralink devices following a similar cadence to, like, let's say, cell phone releases. Maybe not yearly like cell phone releases typically are, but in the same that there would be a release cycle that resembles that, or like, let's say, car release cycles. Someone would get a new car maybe every 5 to 10 years or something.
Trade
Would you
in your
see?
Neuralink and get $200 off the next one.
I mean, do you see that sort of business model develop at some point in the future?
Uh, Maybe. It's difficult to say because like there's been such a precedent set with the automotive industry prior to Tesla, and then Tesla kind of flipped it on its head when it said, "Hey, if we improve any part of the vehicle, we're just going to roll it out with production as fast as we can."
Mm-hmm.
It kind of causes a ton of issues with service down the road if they don't do it properly,
Mm-hmm.
and you can just imagine how many. I was talking with one of the directors of supply chain at Tesla. It's like incredible how much he had stored in his mind because he was thinking about like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of different parts that go into the vehicle. And then if Tesla's changing certain parts, then like if Tesla's changing the design, then most likely they have to change the parts. If the parts change at any given time and there's not like a specific schedule, then all of a sudden like the pieces that you were shipping in from Shanghai and now you're shipping in from Taiwan, you have to like stop this contract and then continue this one. So it's like that is just incredible that they're able to do that. I still can't really wrap my head around how they do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think because that's been the case with Tesla, it wouldn't surprise me if Neuralink kind of does something similar. Like if they improve the implant or the device enough that they think that they should roll it out, they probably will, regardless of what the general schedule is.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, there are just so many different things that would make sense for them to just do it on a regular schedule. So, and plus with this one, it's a little bit different because you need the robot for the surgery, and you need the trained operator to perform the surgery too. So I think it's a little bit more difficult than it would be with just buying a regular consumer product like a car. We'll see though.
So one of the things I noticed initially was you find in your editor, which you mentioned at the end of one of your videos, Andrew Kamen. I was kind of curious on the process of like, running into him, whether you searched out for him or he reached out to you, and what it's been like working with him, and were you ever going to have him on maybe as a podcast guest or something?
I have not really thought about having him on as a podcast guest. Let's see. The first question, I
Just
found
reaching
him,
out. Oh, sorry.
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I think it was the December, one of the December episodes. So it must have been like August, September, October, November. We must have been about 20 episodes in, and he commented on one of the videos that he could do timestamps for the videos.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think he mentioned that he wanted to get paid for it though. And I said like, oh, it would be nice, but I'm not willing to pay anybody at this moment. And then he said something like, well, if you need help editing videos, then I could do that too. And then I was kind of thinking about it in the back of my mind, like it would be kind of nice to have somebody edit the videos. And then so basically he wrote that comment at like the perfect time. And then I said like, yeah, let's do a trial episode. He did a good job. And then after that, I was like, yeah, okay, let's let's keep going. And then it's been great. Like there was one time that he was not, or I was gonna do the editing myself, and I was like, I cannot go back to this. So now I'm pretty reliant on him helping out with the editing.
That's pretty cool. So he wants to be paid for timestamps, huh? Daniel, what do you think about that idea?
John's currently doing timestamps for our videos. I mean,
Yeah.
we could talk offline.
That's, I don't think.
Yeah. Related to the topic, you also have some job listings on your website about some coding jobs because you are thinking of developing Neuralink apps once there's a possibility of that. I believe that that's the purpose for the job listings for coding. Is that? Would you like to talk a little bit about your ideas there?
Sure. I do think in the future, Neuralink will probably have an app store or at least a handful of people that are developing apps specifically for Neuralink implants. Um, and just like how the Tesla products will basically unlock a bunch of different apps that could be developed for that size of screen and that platform, I think it'll be similar for Neuralink.
Mhm.
And so if it's the same case of like, hey, we could develop any app for the Apple iPhone and it's 2007 or 2008, like, hey, there are just so many different apps that you could build. If it's the same for Neuralink and you're building apps for paralyzed people, then you're not only like more motivated to do a good job, I think like it's so much more fulfilling to work on that type of project.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the goal there. I kind of talked about it and released the page a little bit prematurely because I think it's a little far off in the future.
Mhm.
But right now is just kind of to go through some planning and be communicating with somebody who has a little bit more knowledge about how to develop apps, mobile apps, and yeah, just talk with them. And then eventually, I think we would get to development for the Neuralink. Yeah.
Mhm. I kind of have similar goals, but for AR. I'm really excited about AR, and I'm kind of waiting for kind of mainstream consumer devices at this point. I think AR is going to be kind of transformative in like how you can integrate it into your workflow, like for work or for productivity. You could like fill your apartment with dashboards or screens with information that helps you. And uh, well, it's I guess we can maybe talk about this. One of the use cases that I'm intrigued by with Neuralink is the possibility of overriding visual parts of the brain, um, and that may be very far out. I'm curious what you think that where you think that is on the timeline. There's you're familiar with Gabe Newell, the CEO of Valve Software, for like PC gaming.
I'm not, unfortunately.
He's working with a BCI company that is basically looking into applying BCI research to video games, and his goal is to basically instead of rendering like video game graphics to a screen, like a VR screen or an AR display, his eventual goal is to write those signals directly to the brain. Kind of like, I don't know if you've watched Sword Art Online, but it's kind of similar to that vision of VR in the future, where basically the signals are written directly to the brain, and you don't have to have actual like a physical screen. Um, that's probably not even on the first or second page of Neuralink's initial goals, but I feel like maybe at some point there's potential for that, either by Neuralink or some other companies. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Yeah, like it'll probably eventually happen. It's just a matter of like what the timing is. Um, I think you're right also about Neuralink's timing being like it not being a priority necessarily. Um, but I do think one of the things that they've tried to do, especially what Elon tries to do, is he will talk about stuff that he knows is way out, way off in the future, if it's going to motivate a bunch of people to work on it now. And so, like, one of his most common quotes is the public, I think it goes, the public tends to respond to precedents and forget the other one. Precedents and
oh no, that one doesn't ring a bell for me.
okay, yeah, precedents and superlatives, I think it was. So like with SpaceX, one of the things that he first said was if we're the first first humans on Mars, that's a big deal. If we're the fastest or something like that, then everybody responds to it. So with Neuralink, if somebody says like, hey, we are the first to have a monkey play a very sophisticated video game with using just its mind, then like everybody responds to that, and so I think that's one of the reasons that he talks about some of the things that he knows are really far off in the future.
I think one application that I think would actually fit Neuralink pretty well once they're at that point, hardware wise and software wise, would be to have a heads up display directly written to the visual parts of your brain, and then at that point I feel like there wouldn't be a necessity for a cell phone with a screen. Instead, you may just have kind of a server-like device that you keep on you that's within Bluetooth range that does some of like the GPU and CPU processing, and then the entire display is all within your brain. What do you think about that sort of use case? We're talking sci-fi here.
Sure. Yeah, I think it would be sweet. Like there's so many things that we see being developed today that will be useful for what Neuralink wants to do. So even just with like YouTube, like there are so many folks that say, well, what would happen if you could have all the world's information downloaded straight to your brain? It's like we kind of have access to it. It's in the cloud, and we have to access it with a computer and a keyboard. But like, it's pretty available, So like, if we fast forward 10 years from now, maybe there will be more content on YouTube, and there will be more content online, and so, and most likely, the content will be more synthesized down, more concise, more easily digestible, and then it'll make it faster to process and all that. But at some point, I think we get into an issue of just like the brain literally can't process as fast as the information is coming in. So we may be limited in bandwidth for how fast we're interacting with our phones right now. But even with YouTube, like if we're watching at 2x speed, I can usually process any video at 2x speed with relative ease. If I do 3x speed for an audio podcast on Spotify, 80% of them I cannot understand. And then, I'm thinking about like, okay, well, what if it was 5x speed or 10x speed? It doesn't matter if the interface allows for 10x speed. Like you literally just can't process it. So
I might be able to shine some light on that one. There's a plugin I have that lets me go up to 6x speed. Like, and you can go by like 0.1 up. So a lot of videos, like I usually watch anywhere between 1.5 to probably like 3x speed on videos. And there's definitely a lot of people I had to like put down to like say 2.5. And as you get more used to like someone, I think that's really what it is you get more used to like first of all the speed and second of all the person. Because I've noticed, for example, your videos, I started watching at probably like 1.5. I've kind of slowly built up to 1.8. It's just like getting used to their cadence and stuff. So it is kind of weird. But yeah.
Yeah, I personally maxed out at 1.5, so I'm really impressed by you guys.
Gotta get all that content, baby.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Like I think it's literally just like so much YouTube. and so many podcasts and audiobooks and stuff. And then one of the things that I tried to do with my channel, because it's scripted, I kind of have a little bit more control over how fast I talk. And so I deliberately try to speak a little bit faster than most people normally would. And the reason is because I think it's more interesting. So if somebody is watching, let's say there's a 40-year-old person that doesn't know that there's this like toggle feature for speed, then they might be watching at normal speed. But just because I'm talking a little bit faster, they might be more inclined to watch my video than somebody who's doing the exact same content elsewhere. And so, yeah, I don't know if it's worked, but that's kind of the thought process there.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of your videos, might as well transition to this. Not exactly a smooth one, but I noticed that like you've been doing those premium episodes, like you put the border around them and stuff, and you designate them like differently by title and stuff. What was the idea of like coming up with that? Like initially, like, hey, I'm gonna have like special episodes now.
The thought process was most of the videos are not worth watching about 3 months after I release them. But the premium ones, they would be worth watching 3 years from now. And so I was thinking, okay, well, if I can do a fantastic job of this video, it's going to live on YouTube. Hopefully, somehow the algorithm realizes that this is watchable content down the road. Then, yeah, it would just fit that really nicely. I was also thinking, if I designate it as premium, then more people would be willing to watch that and then just watch a playlist of all those premium episodes. And because they could watch it at any time, then they might binge watch 3 years from now. Another thing that I was thinking is that YouTube kind of controls how a lot of people present their content right now. And in the future, it'd be nice to own our own content. And so if down the road, for whatever reason, like YouTube doesn't continue growing at the rate that it's going, then it'd be nice to have our own content and be able to say like, hey, okay, if you're paying, you're going to get something that is premium. And if I've been creating those previously, then people know what they're getting, versus like a new creator, if they have to start all of a sudden designating what's premium or not, then it might be difficult because somebody who's been subscribed for 3 years, they might say like, hey, all of that content before, like now you're trying to separate it into premium or not premium. But to me, it's the same. You know what I mean? So like for me, I just want like some of the videos to clearly be, I mean, at the time they were clearly better than the other videos. Now I think hopefully have started to merge a little bit closer and closer. But moving forward, when we do premium episodes, I want them to be like, way better than the other ones.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could see why someone wouldn't want to, like in 2024, they wouldn't want to be like, well, hey, what was the December 2020 update of Neuralink? But, I get it. Personally, I find it interesting, but maybe that's just me.
Gotcha.
I'm curious, and this is something that I've seen come up a lot in discussions about Neuralink. I'm curious what you think about the safety concerns. For lack of a better way to phrase it, like getting hacked, or some detrimental bug that causes unintended side effects. What do you think about the likelihood of that sort of thing? And do you know of any mitigation strategies that could be taken to minimize that risk?
I think the probability is high.
Yeah.
I think the concerns are very valid. I think Neuralink doesn't know how specifically to minimize that probability in many different ways. But all that being said, I think I I said this in the last episode, and I think this is the best way to put it, is that the people who are working at Neuralink have a lot invested in making sure that the device is as safe as possible and secure as possible in every single way. And the reason is because some of the motivation for them even working at Neuralink is because they have close friends or family who have ALS or dementia, or they're paralyzed and they can't use a computer. And so they're motivated to work at Neuralink. And therefore, if they continue, they should still theoretically have those family members or friends who have those disorders or disabilities. And therefore, they will be thinking about those people when they're doing their design. And so if they're on the edge of like, hey, this is a 9 to 5 job, I'm not going to commit my more time to making this incrementally more secure or safe or test this extra step. If they're on the edge at all, they're going to be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go the extra mile to make sure that this is as safe and secure as I personally can make it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to try to do the same for motivating the team to do the same.
Seeing the track record of reliability with Tesla and SpaceX, I'm pretty optimistic that they'll solve those problems, or at least converge on solving them. Do you think that there may be the possibility of some sort of physical mechanism to disable the device once it's actually installed, besides just removing it? Do you think that I don't think that it's realistic to have like a hardware switch, at the top of it, because I believe that I don't exactly know how this is going to look, but they've claimed that you'd be able to like have hair covering the insertion point. I wonder if maybe there's some sort of magnetic mechanism that could be used to disable it if needed, or do you think that that's too alarmist and unnecessary?
I'm not. It's difficult because like everybody has their own riskiness tolerance. I think the magnet idea is possible to work. Like one of the ways that they expect to do the charging for the implant is probably going to be a magnet plus like the charging apparatus.
Mm-hmm.
And so it'd be basically a baseball cap that has something that's magnetic to. I personally predict that there would be a magnetic piece. Maybe there won't be, but however they decide to do it, there will be something that connects the wireless charging apparatus to
Mm-hmm.
the implant.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, with like other devices, you can unplug it or remove the battery. Although that's not the case with modern cell phones. I'm just thinking that people will be very hesitant to get something like at a consumer level that they can't physically remove without surgery, and having some sort of backup solution to disable it might convince people to get it.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a hardware mechanism that you can turn it off, but I think similar to how our phones have airplane mode,
Mm-hmm.
like might be similar to that. Like you can probably press a button on your phone that most likely will disable any connection.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like if you. I'm just wondering if that's something that has fail safes to where we don't end up in like a Minority Report situation where all your thoughts are. This is. I'm not saying that this is likely or something that Neuralink is going to do, but in some dystopian future where they can read all your memories or read all your thoughts and memories and kind of strong arm you based on that knowledge.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just like I'm personally so much on the side of the spectrum where I don't really mind so much what happens with my data. I probably shouldn't say that publicly, but it's like
I'm honestly
somebody
the same.
knew,
Yeah.
yeah, like I mean, if somebody knew everything that you're thinking all the time, it's like, how bad could it really be? You know, it's like if if you're thinking something, then probably somebody else is thinking the same thing. And at least for me, it's like, you know, if somebody really wanted to do something bad, they could do something bad right now as it is, you know? And so if more information about myself and my thoughts were out in the public, like who really has time to care? You know, if they have time to care about what I'm thinking, it's like, wow, I have other problems. You know, it's like I'm probably doing some cool stuff.
Hmm.
Hey everyone, he's thinking about punching that child. Get him. But I could see, I could see a way where that could be used against like politicians, but I don't know. The average person, like I don't. Eh.
That's a good
Yeah,
point.
I would agree that like most people, it's like who cares what Ted across the streets like, unless he's thinking about like coming up and mugging you right away. Like I don't. Yeah.
I think maybe that might be a good reason to bring up something else I was curious about, which is, and this is not Neuralink related specifically, but what are your thoughts on invasive versus non-invasive BCI? Do you think they could ever reach feature parity at some point?
Hey, I'll be back in a second. By the way,
Okay.
do something.
Okay. Um, I don't think so. I wish I had a better reason for it, but I suspect that Elon's going to be right in that he has said that it's just it just seems like it's impossible
Hmm.
or something that's physically connected. You know, you're like I guess the analogy that he provides is that if you were outside of a football stadium and you were trying to hear what was going on inside the football stadium and you had one microphone outside, then there's no way you could understand exactly what's going on. But if you have 1,000 microphones inside the stadium, you're going to be able to understand like everything. And so I suspect that that's going to hold true for what invasive versus non-invasive PCIs look like. Um,
So
but we'll see.
is the major limiting factor, you think, signal to noise ratio? Is that going to be, or is it basically like to read certain parts of the brain, and this is not even to mention writing to certain parts of the brain. I think that would probably require invasive devices, right, in their entirety. But is the is the reason that non-invasive will not probably reach feature parity because there's so much noise to deal with, and is that something that could be isolated with like noise isolation techniques, or is it more like you can't even hear like certain parts of the brain, for using the football stadium analogy?
Right. Yeah, the noise would be too significant relative to the signal.
Hmm.
And one of the best argument that I've heard for non-invasive BCIs is that with invasive, you can't get to certain parts of the brain. Like they were thinking it's literally like physically impossible to maneuver around the parts of the brain and not damage them to get down deep enough into certain parts. And specifically, like they had mentioned the hippocampus.
Hmm.
And some people talk about the brainstem, or some people talk about the places where you sense smell, like the olfactory bulbs. Um, I think like that has some validity to me. Like that feels right, but in the short term, especially for the easy to access parts of the brain, I don't think it's even going to be close. Invasive, I suspect, is the way to go, but it's way more difficult, and so a lot of companies just aren't willing to commit their resources or go through the regulatory hurdles or have enough capital or motivate enough talented people. It's just
Hmm.
there's too many challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you think too that well, they probably both sides end up as like advancements happen in one side that helps the other side get like more, and then it's like a battle between that. So they both probably have their ups and downs in terms of helping both of them get along eventually.
Completely agreed. Yeah, because like the more data that you can get from either one and provide it to the other, then you can like refine the system. Especially like with Neuralink, I think that's one of the things I'm most excited about for Neuralink's future financial prospects is if you're able to get or if you're able to implant electrodes into one person's brain who is disabled, and then you do it for another person who's disabled, then you, you send both of those patients' information back to a centralized computer, and you use those data sets to train a neural network. Eventually, you end up becoming the go-to database for the specific neuron that correlates to a specific thought or a specific movement. And then you start to be able to do things that like people would never have dreamed of before.
Mhm.
You know, like you start to have so much detailed information, and you can just start to do a lot of the things that they're aspiring to do.
Um, that brings up another point. So, uh, it's incredible what you can do with like a large data set. The more data points you have, it seems the better. Like deep learning applications for self-driving cars, or another example that I can think of is 23andMe. Basically, by sequencing your DNA, there are all kinds of interesting or useful bits of information that you can derive from that information. And the more people participating in it, the bigger the network effect. Do you think after all the regulatory hurdles are overcome, do you think how permissive do you think the Neuralink platform or other BCIs would be as far as like what data someone could collect about themselves? Like if someone wanted to like, I just think with the amount of different types of data that you can collect, I think there's really interesting applications that you could solve. Like for example, addiction. Like looking at how addiction affects the brain. Maybe that's something that could be prevented entirely, or or these patterns and heuristics that people develop, which I believe is mostly kind of in the limbic system, uh, where you kind of develop these patterns and follow them because it makes your daily life easier or your routine easier, but it's not necessarily useful or optimal. Like, do you think people will be able to use all this data to kind of optimize aspects of their lives? Because I'm personally I'm really interested in the quantified self community, which is basically the more data points you collect about yourself, the more of a chance you have to optimize your life and optimize your habits and routines. I think I threw a bunch of stuff at you at once, but I don't know if you have any thoughts about that in general.
Daniel, would you say that your life is data driven?
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel called My Data Driven Life, so it's kind of a selfish question there.
Gotcha. No, that's fine. Um, yeah, like I mean, I buy into the thought process that you just laid out with like, the more data, probably the better, and the more quantifiable some things are, probably the better your decision making is going to be in the long run. Um, like Jeff Bezos, the guy who founded Amazon, like he has a really good quote that I try to stick by. He says like you should use like data and analysis to form your decision making, inform your decision making, but then at the end of it all, you just make the decision with your heart. It has nothing to do with the data or the analysis. And I think that's I just like it, you know. It's
Mm.
like I think that's probably a good way to go. But I guess to go back to your initial question, um, I think it'll be similar to how a lot of people are not willing to give up certain bits of information right now. Like they could, like for example with the 23andMe, they could opt out and just not spit in the little tube thing. Um And so with Neuralink, like anybody who does not want to get one, I predict that they will never be forced to get one. Just like how right now nobody's truly forced to get a cell phone. So because of that, there's kind of this built-in system to enable people to easily opt out, and that's probably a good thing. But for those who do opt in, like you said, like you start to get this powerful network effect where the network grows more powerful as more users increase, and then the value for each of those users also increases.
In your personal Twitter bio, you mentioned 60 trillion by 2030. I have no idea what that means. Do you want to talk about that?
Do you have any guesses?
Net worth,
Oh,
or the total market cap of Tesla.
Yeah. That I think the market cap of Tesla will be around 50 trillion, like in between 50 trillion to 100 trillion. Yeah, because I mean, there so many people are saying like, hey, this is unrealistic. I think the biggest thing that people underestimate is just like if we were able to backtrack 10 years ago from today and go back to 2011, if somebody said that, hey, in 2021, the market cap of the biggest of the 10 biggest companies in the United States are going to be north of 500 billion, and the top 3 are going to be north of or around or north of 2 trillion, everybody would have been like, hey, you got to calm down those numbers a little bit. And I've done like a lot of calculating and going through, like I literally watch every single earnings call. Listen to every single earnings call. I comb through the numbers. It's like I go through every single thing that I personally know how to right now, and you just get this wild, crazy number because even if they sell the hardware at a lot, like if they sold the cars at a loss and the energy storage products at a loss, it would still make up like incredible amounts of revenue, and so much of a percentage of that revenue translates to profit because it's all software. So, and they're not selling the cars or the energy products at a loss. I mean, I take that back. Some of the energy products, arguably, they are selling at a loss. Like the solar glass roof, they are probably selling it at a loss, even though it's a bundle. But with the cars, they're not selling at a loss. Plus, they can just have this ridiculous software package. And if they get anywhere close to full self-driving, the numbers are going to be ridiculous. And I'm of the view that Tesla's pretty far off on full self-driving, like true full self-driving. I think it'll be more than 10 years. But I think every single month and year up until that point, they can increase the full self-driving subscription price. So at the beginning, it'll start at $99 a month or $199 per month. And eventually it'll go up to $299 a month, $349, $599, $649, and it just keeps increasing until you get to around 1,200 is my guess, is kind of like one of the tops around 2030. But if you have a fleet of like 50 million cars that 40 to 50% of them have full self-driving subscriptions, then the profit numbers are absolutely ridiculous. And then you combine that, and then that's just on the vehicle side of the business. The energy side of the business will probably be even bigger than the vehicle side. So yeah, I mean, I believe Tesla will be around 50 to 100 trillion by 2030. Yeah.
And when we're talking about $1,200 per month for a full self-driving subscription, I think the target audience for that is probably like businesses using Tesla semis and rideshare networks. Is that because that sounds unrealistic for a regular consumer, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. Like I think in order for those economics to work out, yeah, in some cases, I think the businesses would have to operate fleets, or just regular folks don't have to own a car, or they do own the car and they just rent it out throughout the day. So then, even if they're paying the 1,200 per month, they're still making it up because the utility of the vehicle is so high.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because personally, I only use my vehicle maybe like 30 minutes per day on average. So that's 23 hours and 30 minutes that is unused. Another investing question, and this is really random. For a long-term investor such as myself, why would you recommend options trading if you were to convince me to get into options trading?
I guess the first question should be, would I recommend it? If it really depends on like what your motivations are.
Yeah. Personally, I just consider options trading to be a glorified form of gambling, but maybe that's an unfair assessment by me.
Gotcha.
Unless you're like really digging into earnings calls and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Okay, so I guess there's two things that I think are three things that I want to bring up with options. I love options. I love stocks. I love investing. I think yeah. I think the number one thing is there are two sides to take with the options. You can like buy or sell them.
Mhm.
And then, I mean, I guess additionally, there are like the call options, which are the ability to buy in the future. And then there's also the puts. So it's like how you play them. There's kind of four initial ways, even with the most basic trading of options. So because of that, if you were to compare it to gambling, then it's almost like you have the ability to be the dealer or the bettor.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The second thing is, in my experience so far, every single person and every single experience, no matter how experienced the person is, they will always go in a cycle of starting with ETFs and then eventually moving to stocks and then eventually moving to options and eventually moving to spreads, which are like series of options together.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually they say, okay, well, this is a little too complex and it's not worth my time. I'm going to go back to ETFs.
Mm-hmm.
And they eventually get approximately the same returns.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that options, one of the coolest things about the simplest of options is that you get this phenomenon where you can have outcomes that are disproportionate to what the value of the company is doing. So if, for example, if Tesla when Tesla went 10x from 2019 to 2021, if you had the right options, you could have made like thousands of times your money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, you know, it's almost like an in between of investing in stocks or starting a startup. With a startup, like, you have a high probability of failure, but if you do well, then the outcomes are not just straight like, hey, I could have the salary or I could have nothing. Instead, it's like I could have nothing or I could have like a million times my money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if the goal is literally just mathematically to increase your money, then okay, hey, you should take this, you should do this thing that you have this huge possible upside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So with options, kind of the same thing. I personally love them because you can play both sides. So like for Tesla, I mean now too, I have options for Tesla, but before I had a lot. And when I had a lot, it was like, yeah, I mean, I think this company is ridiculously undervalued, and it's ridiculously undervalued enough that I'm willing to risk even more with options. That's just on the straight, like long call side.
Okay.
If you want to get into the a little bit more safe stuff, you could sell calls while owning the underlying stock, and they call them covered calls.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like those limit your upside, but they decrease your downside sometimes pretty substantially.
Yeah.
So Arguably, like those are a little bit more safe than some of the other strategies that people use.
I might have to take another look at options at some point. But yeah, thank you for your perspective on that. I have one more question, but John, did you want to go first with some of your rapid fire questions?
I wanted to mention that since this seemed like a good time for it, is because you're going into the numbers. You can definitely tell that you dig into your numbers when it comes to these things. And I wanted to mention that at one point because I remember the reason I ended up writing this down. It wasn't in the question list. It was just as a general note to myself. When you're going over the cost of Neuralink, I mean, like it wasn't just some hypothetical, like, oh, it might be this. You're like, oh, well, he mentioned LASIK. So let me get down to the nitty gritty of like what specifically LASIK costs, and like I like that about obviously some of the videos that go into the price side of things, and even in this podcast here, a couple times you went into the price stuff. You get like very specific about it, and it's good.
Thank you. Very much appreciate it.
But, I guess in terms of let's say questions. I guess yeah. You mentioned one of the podcasts already. I guess just general like YouTubers you watch. Maybe like is there other Neuralink content now that exists, or just stuff you enjoy on your own type of deal? You mentioned the one for the Tesla one that got you into Neuralink.
Yeah, Tesla Daily probably my favorite. I love Dave Lee. He talks about like investing in life and stuff. Um, I watch so much, so there's a bunch that I'm a fan of, but I don't watch like every single episode. One is Solving the Money Problem with Stephen Mark Ryan, Hyperchange with Galileo Russell, Graham Stephan, The Church Sisters, Meet Kevin. Um, there's an accounting channel called Life Accounting. I watched a ton of their videos when tax season was coming. A lot of business oriented stuff, and then I also have started getting into some more of the Lex Friedman podcasts, Joe Rogan when he was more on YouTube. Yeah, just watched. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. Like, I can't. It's weird because like right now my brain is all thinking like investing stuff.
Yeah.
And those are the stuff that I watch more frequently. So it's sounding like I only watch that stuff, but I watch so much. And I mean, I assume that you guys are similar.
Yeah. I watched a bunch of Meet Kevin, Andre, Jick, and like a bunch of other, yeah. But I watch mostly SpaceX stuff nowadays.
Like the Everyday Astronaut.
Marcus House, Scott Manley, What About It? And there's so many others. And then I watch the live streams for like the Starship launches and stuff.
Gotcha.
Right.
What about you, John?
I watch. I don't know. I'd probably say about half of it's gaming stuff. Probably about a third of it's podcasts. Just a bunch of different ones. Like there's one I watch. A bunch of like. I don't know if you ever watched them. Like Your Movie Sucks. I Hate Everything, and Ralph the Movie Maker have a podcast together that talk about movies and stuff. And there's a bunch of different podcasts I watch through there. And then probably about like whatever the remaining percent is variety stuff. But yeah, that's usually the stuff I'm into.
Gotcha. How amazing is that? Like, I think it is so cool. Like YouTube, I don't know. Like, I started getting more into it about 2 or 3 years ago, and then last year I was just like nonstop watching YouTube, and this year it's insane how much I watch.
But you replaced the television, man. Instead of sitting there watching television, you're sitting there watching YouTube now. Like, there's only like 2 shows I have recorded DVR wise that I sit and watch, like from my TV, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, before I was one of those kids that like never watched. I rarely watched TV. I didn't play a lot of video games. I mean, like I played Pokemon a lot when I was a kid, like young kid, and then after that phase, it was like hardly any TV, hardly any movies, hardly any books, hardly any games. And so it was always like investing stuff on my computer. And then eventually I got into like some books, but and audiobooks and podcasts. But then it just started becoming like, hey, all of this stuff is easier to find on YouTube. And everybody goes down these specific rabbit holes, these like really, really narrow niches. And some of them do such a fantastic job. And it's from like all over the world. It's just incredible.
So I had one more question, and this is kind of related to something you mentioned, which is Lex Friedman. Every episode, he asks a question at the very end, and that's, what's the meaning of life? Do you have a 60-second answer since you're running out of time at this point?
I don't have a good answer. I cite Elon's answer, which is like basically to what's his? It's like grow, expand the scope and scale of consciousness.
Yeah.
And yeah,
There you go.
probably. I mean, he's historically been right about so many things, and I've pondered over that answer for so many months now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he's probably right, because consciousness is like the thing that separates us humans from practically everything else, living
Right.
or not.
In one of his recent talks, he brought up he didn't mention it by name, but it sounded like the rare earth hypothesis, which is one of the explanations for the Fermi paradox. Basically, the idea is that the reason we haven't discovered aliens yet or seen Dyson spheres or something like that is because all of the conditions that affect intelligent life's emergence makes Earth and humans in general incredibly rare. And then he cited the example that a few 100 million years from now, the sun is going to expand to the point where life may not be possible anymore on Earth. And the fact that that's only a 10% shift in like the 3.5 billion years of life existing on Earth. Basically, if we were 10% off, then life would not have developed to the point where we could become multiplanetary. And so that was his argument for why he wants to make us multiplanetary, because of that fact, consciousness is probably incredibly rare in the universe. Okay, well, what's your thoughts on simulation theory?
Let's go.
Oh gosh. I don't drink, but I think it would be good if I did for this question.
It's a soda, but I'll take one for you.
Yeah. Gotta drink my water real quick. I don't know. I don't really spend too much time thinking about it, because I want to enjoy like what we currently have, and so whether it's a simulation or not, like I feel like I personally get a lot of joy out of what life has to offer right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like whether it's real or not, I'm liking it, you know. And then if I had 100% certainty, which I don't think we will ever achieve,
mm-hmm.
but it's like if I could get 100% certainty, would I change anything? I don't think I would. You know, so it's like, is it worth spending the time to really think about it?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. I don't know. What do you guys think?
That's kind of the question, because we've definitely talked about in a previous episode with the two of us. So that's about the question, or about the answer I give roughly, is the like whether it is or isn't, like, you know, we're still experiencing whatever. So it's kind of like, what? I can't really change anything about it. So like, you know, just I guess write it out.
I think personally, my personal belief set is I'm an optimistic nihilist. I have a incredibly nihilistic view of kind of life in general, but not. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's something that negatively impacts me. The way I look at it, the human civilization will live until a certain point and then go extinct. Whether that's in the next 10 years or the next 1,000 years, or we make it all the way to the heat death of the universe. Eventually it's all going to be over unless we discover something newly fundamental about physics that means that we can live indefinitely. And so that kind of makes me a little bit sad, but at the same time, I think this is kind of spilling over into meaning of life territory for me, but I think for me personally, the meaning of life is basically we exist, we kind of emerged, and you know, if we can't find any actual like purpose that was designed for us by a creator or by the programmer of the simulation, if that's the case. If we can't find that inherent meaning ourselves, and I don't think that we ever will, because like you mentioned, we're in a closed system. We probably won't ever know like what's outside of this closed system. Then the only thing that remains for us to do is kind of do whatever we can to add to all of the legacy that the human race has left on this universe, and find things that are beautiful, create things that are beautiful, and basically create our own meaning, because that meaning probably doesn't exist, and if it does, we may not ever know about it.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, like creating our own meaning, like that line really resonated with me. I think, yeah, I mean, what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
As far as simulation theory in general, I'm more excited about like the future, rather than like the possibility of a layer of reality outside of our own. I'm more interested in a layer of reality that we create. So that's why I'm really excited about VR, AR, Neuralink, because I think that's all converging on a future where we can create the simulation that people will speculate about from within that simulation. So
Yeah.
maybe at some distant point in the future, there will be, people analogous to us debating these very questions about their own meaning and existence.
Yeah, are we, dude? Can simulations create simulations create simulations? Is that like a thing?
It's turtles all the way down.
Yeah. It's crazy. See, that's one part of the question I've never thought about. Like, okay, so what if we're in a simulation? Can we create another simulation for the simulation? Like, I never thought like more than just the one rabbit hole deep.
I think that's one of the arguments for if we end up creating that kind of simulation, then that's evidence that we're likely in a simulation ourselves. And I think that's Elon Musk's perspective as well. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
You mentioned the 1 in a billion thing, right? There's 1 in a billion chance.
yeah, and I forget his specific reasoning. It might be what you described. I think he also, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I think he also talked about like the timing. Like if you just go throughout the history of the world,
Mhm.
it would just be like, just for timing's sake, it would be like improbable that we're in that very narrow band of time where we're not, but we're on the cusp of it.
Mhm.
I forget if that's Elon or somebody else, or if I'm misinterpreting what they said, but I think that makes sense too.
I think Elon's quote on this was basically, he used the example of video games. So he basically said, 40 years ago we had, I don't know if it's 40 or 50 or 60 at this point, but we had, Pong, which is basically like a ball and two lines. And now we have, video games that are very photoreal. There are some filters that you can apply to GTA 5 that make it look photorealistic, and you can't tell the difference between that and dashcam footage. And if you follow that thread, even if the rate of advancement that we're seeing right now drops by a factor of 1,000, then that just means that we'll achieve that sort of reality at some tangible point in the future, whether that's like 10 years or 50 years or 10,000 years.
I feel like I just watched the Recode interview with Kara Swisher and then one other guy. Yeah, that sounds exactly like what he said.
Mm-hmm. John, did you have any questions?
Yeah. Okay. So I haven't seen through like every video. I watched all the main ones, and I watched probably about half the interviews.
Okay.
And I noticed you had a conversation with Jake about 8 months ago, and that's been my favorite so far. And is he coming back on at some point? Because man, that guy. Shout out to him.
He is awesome. Yeah, I huge fan of his. He actually has a podcast now. It's called Paper Mountains. Yeah, he is so cool. Like, yeah,
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, he has a podcast called Paper Mountains, and I think he's done 10 episodes now. But I definitely want to have him back on. Like I think the way that he thinks about life is great. And it's kind of similar to how I feel like I think about life, and we came from such totally different worlds. So for us to have the same outlook and or have similar thinking about what's important and what's not important, it's just so cool to see that. But yeah, I guess to answer your question, yes, I definitely want to have him back on. I'll probably reach out to him. Like sometimes we text each other, but I'll probably reach out to him sometime before the end of the year at least to have him back on the show.
The exclusive tip here on Random Ramblings.
That's fine.
You mentioned in one of the early videos that you're skeptical that that AI will be an existential threat in the way that like is portrayed in the mainstream. Would you like to expand on those thoughts? And do you have like a more nuanced version of what you think the progression of AI into like AGI, ASI territory will look like?
Yeah. So I guess like the first thing I always try to preface with this one is like it's historically dumb to bet against Elon, and Elon thinks like, hey, well, artificial and general intelligence is going to be a significant threat. It's almost like the fact that he realizes that's the case, and he's doing everything that he can, and many other people are doing everything they can to minimize that threat, then it's like it's gonna become not a threat. So
yeah.
I kind of am of the belief that, hey, with everybody so aware that this could be an issue, then they're going to be able to figure out how to minimize that threat enough where it's not an issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great perspective. It's like we see all these examples in sci-fi movies and novels, and we see Black Mirror, and we have a bunch of scientists around the world manifesting the SpongeBob meme where they're like, write that down. So I feel like all these examples in fiction are kind of providing like food for thought for us to come up with mitigation strategies for those existential threats. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Like the more imagination that people can have, I think the more likely it is that we can identify the potential issues. Exactly what you said. And I think I said this in one of the episodes, and I think I still continue to believe that it's very true. Like whenever there's a fire, or somebody expects that there's going to be a fire, okay, so in the context of investing, when people will say like, hey, there's a recession coming, like there's not going to be, for the reason that they suspect there's not going to be. And this is played out like so many times throughout history. It's pretty ridiculous to now think that anybody could call a recession now. And the reason is because if everybody thinks that something is going to happen, then that, like by definition, that means that they realize and they're going to try to do everything they can to prevent it. So the issue becomes like when there is a fire or a problem that is growing and it's small, and people either don't see it at all, or they see it and they don't care. And then by the time that they realize that it's a big fire, it's too late. So, I mean, with anything, with recession and investing, like I think that's the case. Like there are times where people may be saying fire, fire, fire over here, and there is another fire over here. So they might be right that there is the recession, but the reasoning was wrong. Same thing with for Neuralink or artificial intelligence or whatever it is. Like the more times that we can say, hey, here's this potential small fire, and then put it out, like I think that's a good thing.
John, did you have any other thoughts? I think we're nearing the end of our time box, so I was thinking if you didn't have anything else, we could let Ryan kind of talk about where to follow you, what, like if you want some like socials plugged or your Discord server or whatnot. Where can we find you, and what would you like to share with us?
You can follow us on YouTube. It's just Neura Pod, so Neura space Pod. And then that name is used pretty much for all the social platforms. I think on Instagram we're Neura Podcast because Neurapod was taken. And then yeah, we're on pretty much all the major ones, including like Discord, Reddit, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and hopefully gonna continue to grow with all those platforms and maintain a bigger presence on all of them moving forward.
Not officially associated with Neuralink legally. So I noticed you started doing that in your videos recently. So I was,
yeah,
I guess
that's a good point.
Because I noticed on a couple of your live streams, people like were asking you questions, thinking like that you're part of the team or something. When you did the one with the dude leaving, what was his name?
Max Odak.
Yeah, like when he left, and like one of the questions was like about you working there. You're like, oh no, I don't work there.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, thank you guys for having me on. It was a great conversation. You guys prepared super well. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. Yeah, absolutely. We're happy to do it again too.
So maybe we can work something out later. But for now, that is part 1 of the interview with Neura Pod. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and smash that like button, people, if you want more crazy, good interviews like this.
And subscribe to Neura Pod.
Subscribe to them as well, for sure. Check them out on all the social. We'll make sure to put them in like description stuff too, like the Twitter and the YouTube and such.